Okay, I'm going to make a couple videos about SSH so you can practice using SSH. In this case, I'm going to be practicing with the VM that we've just created, which you have to set up a couple of networking rules in order for that to work. So this video is actually going to be about setting up the VM with the network rules, and then we'll talk about SSH more in depth in the next video. So how to set up your networking rules for your Ubuntu VM that we've created to allow SSH connections. I found a really good article that covers most of it. One thing that he skips that you'll need to do is open up your VirtualBox program and then go to File, Host Network Manager. And if you've never been in here, this is just going to be empty. You just click this Create button, and it's going to create this VBox Net 0. You want to click Enable on the checkbox. That's just a network host manager. This is a host network for VirtualBox. It's called VBox Net 0. All right. You can click close on that. And then for whichever VM you want to set this up for, I'm going to do this for Ubuntu 2. That's just a second VM that I've created. Click on Settings. Inside of the Settings, click on the Network tab. And I know this is kind of small. I don't know how to make this bigger though. So I guess if you need to like maximize the screen and get real close to it, you can. On your Network tab, you'll notice that there are separate tabs for Adapter 1, 2, 3, and 4. Adapter 1 should already be enabled. If not, make sure it's enabled, and you want to do this NAT option. Click the Advanced drop-down and click on Port Forwarding, and then this will be empty, but you just click this little green Create button. For the name, you should call it SSH, all caps. Move my mouse for you there. The protocol is TCP. The host IP, 127.0.0.1. Host port, 5679. Guest IP, 10.0.2.15. and guest port 22. All of these things are listed here, and this will let me zoom in. So let me bump up the size here. So this is basically what I'm doing. Okay, port forwarding. What I'm saying is anytime I try an SSH to my own laptop, 127.0.0.1 is your own machine, port 5679, it's going to forward that request to the guest. When it says guest, you can think VM. It's going to forward it to this guest IP 10.0.2.15, port 22. Okay, click OK in the settings there, and then that was on adapter 1. Now you want to click on adapter 2 and enable network adapter, make sure that's checked, and then attached to, you want to select the option host only adapter, and the name should populate that VBox Net 0 for you, which is great. Now, that's it for the Network tab. Up in the System tab, there's this boot order section. Make sure you click the checkbox for Network so that it is checked and enabled. And then this Extended Features, you want to make sure that Enable IO API-C is checked and enabled. That one by default was already checked for me, but make sure that's checked and the network is checked. And then click OK. That's going to save all those settings we just did. And then you're going to boot up your VM. And while that spins up, the next thing that he talks about in this article, and I'll put a link to this article in the description of the video because this was a really helpful article for me. The next thing he talks about is setting up Ubuntu and installing it. And I've already done that. We did that in a previous video, and I've already done that on this VM as well. So I'm going to skip this part, but we can't skip step 3 entirely. There's pieces that we need. So once he's done setting up his VM, then he talks about installing the SSH server. So when you SSH onto a server, that server needs some kind of software program running that knows how to either accept or reject SSH connection attempts. So the one that we're going to use is this OpenSSH server. So these are the two commands we're going to do. The first one installs it, and the second one just makes sure that it installed right and that it's running. So we're going to do that. And then we're basically done. The only other thing we'll have to do is we're going to get the IP address on our VM and make sure that it matches what we set up in that host network manager. There's a good chance it'll be wrong, slightly different, and you just have to update it. So let's open up the terminal. I'll make this bigger so you can see it. Okay, we want to install OpenSSH server. So the thing with VMs is I don't think you can copy and paste from your host machine to the VM or vice versa. So I'm just going to type this out. Sudo apt-get install OpenSSH-server. Hit enter. It's going to ask for your password. That'll run for a second. Oh, I already installed it. So if you haven't installed it, that's going to run for a minute, and it might take a second to run. Feel free to pause the video and come back when it's done. And then you'll do this sudo service SSH status, and you should get this active running message here. If not, then the install didn't work correctly, and you can Google it and try and figure out maybe what went wrong. Maybe try the install again. This sudo service SSH status, it doesn't just print to the terminal. It's like a running thing, so you need a Control-C to end it or to exit out of it. Okay, so the VM is set up for SSH. The other thing you may need to do, Ubuntu sometimes comes with a default firewall that blocks SSH attempts. So you might need to do this sudo it needs to be lowercase, sudo ufw, Ubuntu firewall, allow SSH. And then the IP address. Let's check the IP address. So the command for that is IP space A, or if you want to type out address, you can. They do the same thing. That's going to list out the IP addresses 127.0.0.1, 10.0.2.15, which is what we used for that port forwarding. And then this last one, you're looking for the iNet option. iNet6 is your v6 IP address, I believe, but this is the one we want. So 192.168.56.3. Once again, we can't copy and paste from the VM to the host, so we just need to remember that. If you want to write it down somewhere, you can. Yours will be different than mine. But whatever this IP address is, we now need to go open up the network manager and make sure that we have the same one listed for VBoxNet 0. And mine is different. Mine is 192.168.56.1 instead of .3. So I need to change the 1 to a 3. And I think for this to take effect on my VM, I'm going to have to shut the VM down. So once you know what you need to change, go ahead and power off the machine. That's fine. And then in this network manager, you just double click on the one you want to change. For me, VBoxNet 0, double click on it, and it opens up this section at the bottom. Make sure that this configure manually option is checked, and then I just need to update this 1 to a 3. Yours will most likely be the same kind of thing where most of it is correct, and you just need to change this last number to something, 101 or 3 or 8 or whatever it says on your VM. Mine is 3, so I'm going to change it to a 3 and click apply. And you'll notice that after I click apply, it changes it back. I don't know why it does that, but it did update. So you should be good to go now. So apply and then close, and then start your VM back up. And that should be it. It should be ready to go. So now, as soon as your VM has spun up, you want to open up a terminal on your laptop, on your host machine. I'm going to open this guy up and make him bigger for you so you can see. Okay, and then I'm still waiting for the machine to spin up, but once it does, we're going to do an SSH command. And SSHing is really simple, and I'm going to cover this in more depth in the next video, as well as setup configuration stuff, but for now we're just going to make sure it works. So SSH, lowercase, SSH, then you say what user and what IP address you're trying to SSH to. Now in the real life, you're going to have a prod server somewhere that you're SSHing onto, or a staging server. And this is the IP address of that server. In my case, I'm SSHing onto my VM. So I'm SSHing to my own machine. So it's 127.0.0.1. And this is where the port forwarding comes in. So 5679. And so you do this -P and then a space 5679. And this will try and SSH to my machine at port 5679. And that is going to forward to my VM, which is all spun up now. So this, if I hit enter. Okay, so when you do your first SSH command, the first time that your computer is connecting to an IP address, it's going to ask you this question. Are you sure you want to continue? Type out yes and hit enter. And it is going to ask for your password. Now, this is not the password of your laptop or the machine you're on. This is, I'm trying to SSH in as this user, Lauren, at this other machine, which is my VM. So this is asking for that user's password on that machine. So this is the password I log into my VM with, not my laptop. And you hit enter, and you're done, and I'm in. And you can see now this has changed, right? It tells me what user I'm logged in as and where. And the computer's name is, for me, is Lauren VirtualBox. And if I type exit and hit enter, now I'm back to my user, Lauren Pabst, at Lauren's MacBook Pro. So that's how you do a simple SSH command, and that is how you set your virtual machine up for SSH. And then in my next video, I will talk a little bit more about configuration options and using like SSH keys and stuff.